The scent of freshly brewed coffee and old paper filled my Aunt Diane's office. It wasn't the first time she'd received me among mountains of files. But that afternoon, the look behind her reading glasses was sterner than usual. "Penelope, sit down. We need to have a serious talk," she said, pushing aside a dossier with a firm gesture. "Did something happen?" I asked, feeling a slight knot in my stomach. "Yes, your wedding, or rather what comes after," she affirmed, her eyes fixed on me. They were the same eyes that had dismantled 1,000 lies in the courthouse, and now they were scrutinizing me. "You're going to marry David. He's a kind man from a good family, apparently. But love niece sometimes clouds the most basic judgment." "Aunt Diane, what is this about?" I protested, though, without much conviction. I knew there was no turning back when Diane adopted that tone. "This," she said, sliding an informational brochure across the oak table, "is about a notarized declaration of assets. I'm not demanding, but I want you to do it before signing any marriage papers." The sentence echoed in the room as cold and dry as a hammer's blow. I blinked, confused. "A declaration of assets, like an inventory?" "But David and I don't have great fortunes. He's an architect. I work in marketing. We'll share expenses like everyone else." Diane took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose, a gesture of weariness she only showed with family. "Penelope, my dear, I've spent 30 years watching the worst of family feuds come in and out of my courtroom, and 70% of them start or escalate horribly when there's money, property, or inheritance involved, and nothing is clear on paper. It's not about how much you have now, it's about what you might have in the future, what you bring to the relationship, what you might receive from your father or me. And most of all, it's about setting clear boundaries from the beginning." "But it sounds so distrustful, as if we're already planning for a divorce," I argued uncomfortably. The idea repulsed me. I loved David. We had picked out a little house in the suburbs of Boston. We were talking about names for our future children. "It's not a distrust of love. It's prudence in the face of life," she replied, implacable. "Do you think the couples who end up tearing each other apart in court started out thinking about divorce? No. They trusted blindly, and when the blindness passed, only the mud was left. And mud, my child, is sticky and it stains everything. Please do it. For me, it's the best wedding gift I can give you. The peace of mind of knowing that what's yours will remain yours, no matter what happens." Her final plea, also uncharacteristic of her, moved me. Even though I didn't fully understand it, even though it seemed excessive and unromantic, I nodded. "Okay, Aunt Diane, I'll do it." The process was quicker than expected. The lawyer, a colleague of hers, wasn't surprised by the request at all. "It's becoming more and more common, Ms. Cruz, especially in second marriages or with unequal assets," he told me with professional coolness. I signed the papers detailing my savings account, the fruits of my years of work, the small apartment my grandmother had left me in the South End, and some modest investments. I left there with a blue folder under my arm, and a strange feeling as if I had signed a pact with distrust. That night, having dinner with David at our favorite restaurant in the North End, I told him what had happened. His reaction was instant and visceral. "What?" He dropped his fork with a sharp clatter. "Your aunt the judge made you do an inventory of your things." "Seriously, Penelope?" "She didn't make me. She recommended it. And it's just a formality, David, so that everything is clear." "Of course it's going to be clear." His voice rose, attracting glances from neighboring tables. He lowered his voice, but the anger was still simmering. "What is that supposed to mean? That my family or I are going to go after your money, is that it? Because that's the only thing I can think of. My mother is going to flip out when she finds out. It's a lack of respect, Penelope. A brutal lack of trust. It's not against you. Of course it's against me," he interrupted. against what we are. We're going to be a family. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. Or not. Or are we going to keep separate accounts and sleep in separate bedrooms too? David, please don't exaggerate. I pleaded, feeling guilt creep up my throat. He was right. It sounded cold. It's just a piece of paper to appease my aunt. It won't change anything between us. He shook his head, a look of disappointment on his normally affable face. It already has, Penelope. You've put a wall between us before we've even started. A wall of papers and distrust. My mother always says that in close-knit families, you don't need that trust is the only thing that matters. Mentioning his mother, Sharon, made me even more nervous. She was a strong-willed woman, a matriarch who ruled her home in their Back Bay apartment with an iron fist. David adored her and often sought her approval in everything. Don't tell your mother anything, please, I begged. It's not her business. Everything that affects us is her business, he replied with a conviction that chilled me to the bone. But don't worry, I won't tell her anything for now. The dinner ended in a tense silence. He paid the bill without letting me contribute a single dollar, as if to reaffirm his role as the provider, the man of the house. As we left, he took my hand, but his gesture was stiff. I just hope that damn paper makes you happy, Penelope, he murmured, before giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. That night in my South End apartment, I stared at the blue folder on the dining table. It seemed harmless, but between its pages pulsed the seed of a discord I had never foreseen. My Aunt Diane's warning echoed in my head. Mud is sticky, and it stains everything. For the first time, I was afraid I had just started to step in it. Sunday lunch at David's parents' house was an unshakable ritual, a display of matriarchal power in the spacious Back Bay apartment. Sharon, my future mother-in-law, presided over the table like a general reviewing her troops, while her husband Arthur, a man with a perpetually tired expression, took refuge behind the newspaper. David's younger brother Kevin, 22, and with a lanky air fiddled with his phone under the table. The conversation, as always, revolved around David's successes. My architect Sharon would say with pride the latest acquisitions of some acquaintance and neighborhood gossip. I smiled, nodded, and passed the salad. I still had the bitter aftertaste of the previous night's argument. David had treated me with a polite coldness all morning. Penelope, honey, another little helping of pot roast? Sharon asked, with a sweetness that didn't reach her eyes, which were small and bright like beads of jet. No, thank you, Sharon. It was delicious, but I can't eat another bite. You're so thin. Men, David, you know, they prefer a little more substance, she commented, casting an appraising glance at my figure. David laughed uncomfortably. After coffee, Sharon gave the silent order. Arthur and Kevin disappeared into the living room, one to his newspaper, the other to his video game. David and I stayed with her in the dining room, clearing the table. It was then, with the clatter of dishes in the background, that Sharon dropped the bomb. Well, since we're family and about to be completely, there's a little matter. She began, drying a glass with exaggerated meticulousness. Her tone was light, almost playful. It's for Kevin, poor thing. He's having a terrible time with that old car of his always in the shop. And with the new job he's about to start in Lowell. Imagine the commute by public transport would be a nightmare. That's a shame, I murmured, not seeing where the conversation was going. Of course, that's why I've thought of a solution, she continued, putting the glass down and leaning against the edge of the marble table, looking at me intently. A solution in which you can help Penelope. A simple thing. I froze the dish towel suspended in mid-air. Me? Yes, you, honey. You with that well-furnished head of yours, and from what David tells me, you've been so prudent with your affairs, she said. And I noticed the mention of prudence had a sour undertone. I need $6,000. Just $6,000? It's for a down payment on a decent car for Kevin. A compact car, nothing fancy. He'll pay the monthly installments, of course. The air thickened. $6,000 was not an insignificant amount. It was precisely a large part of my savings, the ones I had just had notarized. Sharon, I don't know what to say, I stammered, searching for David's gaze. He was nodding with a half smile as if his mother had just proposed buying a bouquet of flowers. There's nothing to say, sweetheart. It's a family favor. You give it, and as soon as Kevin is on his feet, he'll pay you back little by little. No rush. Her voice was silky, but her eyes never left mine, daring me to refuse. Mum's right, Pen. David intervened, putting a hand on my shoulder. His touch no longer felt comforting. It's what families do. We help each other. Kevin is my brother, and soon he'll be yours. But $6,000 is a lot of money, David, and it's not like I have it just sitting there in cash. I tried to reason, feeling panic start to climb up my throat. Oh, please. Sharon let out a fake, sharp laugh. With that declaration of assets, your aunt the judge had you do. I'm sure you have everything more than under control. You'll know exactly where to get it from. A wire transfer and it's done. There it was. The connection was clear, obscene. My document of protection was seen by her as a treasure map, an invitation to plunder. That document is... It's a private matter, Sharon, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. Nothing is private in a family, she snapped, losing the mask of sweetness for a moment. Her face hardened. Unless you don't really want to be part of this family. Unless you're going to marry my son with one hand out and the other behind your back, hoarding your little pennies for yourself. Mum, calm down, David said, but his tone was reproachful towards me, not her. Penelope isn't like that. She just needs a moment to think about it, right, honey? It's normal anyone would be surprised by a request like that out of the blue. It's not a request, David, I said, finally finding a thread of firmness. It's a demand for a large sum of money, and no, I don't have it planned in my budget. I'm sorry, Sharon. The silence that followed was glacial. Sharon looked at me as if I had just spit on the Italian marble floor. Then slowly, she sketched a smile that was anything but kind. Well, well, well. I see. Fine, it doesn't matter. David's son, we'll talk later. I'm sure between your salary and what your father and I can scrape together, even with the mortgages and everything. She left the sentence hanging loaded with guilt and sacrifice as she sighed deeply. You don't have to worry, Mum, David said, and his voice sounded cold and distant. His hand withdrew from my shoulder. Penelope has made her position clear, very clear. David, it's not my position. It's... I tried to explain, but he was already turning away, collecting plates with a brusque gesture. No, no, child. You're absolutely right, Sharon said, recovering her honeyed tone, but with a spark of triumph in her eyes. She had achieved her goal to isolate me, to paint me as the selfish one, the one who didn't share. You look out for what's yours. It's understandable. After all, you're not family yet. Maybe after the wedding, things will look different. The threat, veiled but perfectly audible, floated in the room. After the wedding, as if my I do would automatically turn me into her personal ATM. The drive home was in a sepulchral silence. David drove with his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Do you realize what you've done? He finally exploded as we got onto I-93. You embarrassed my mother in her own house. I embarrassed her, I retorted, incredulous. David, she asked me for $6,000 out of the blue. Does that seem normal to you? In my family it is, he shouted, slapping the steering wheel with the palm of his hand. We help each other. If my brother needs a car and I can help him, I do it. If you can, you do it. But of course, you have your things locked in a safe, with 7 locks, thanks to your aunt. That's not it, and you know it, I said, feeling tears of anger and frustration cloud my vision. It's a matter of principle, that you don't ask for that amount of money like you're asking for salt, and certainly not with that attitude of entitlement. Entitlement? He spat with contempt. You're talking about my mother. She only thinks about her family. Something you apparently don't understand. First that stupid paper and now this. I'm starting to wonder if you really want to be part of anything that isn't just Penelope and her money. His words cut me like knives. Everything we had built, the plans. The love I thought was solid was crumbling in an instant, replaced by this caricature of myself, a greedy, calculating woman. What I want is a husband, not a son who blindly obeys his mother. I blurted out, unable to contain myself anymore. He slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the shoulder and earning a honk from the car behind us. "Get out of my car," he said with a terrifying calm. "What did you just say about my mother? Get out." We stared at each other. In his eyes there was no trace of the man who had asked me to marry him. There was only anger and loyalty, an absolute poisoned loyalty, directed at another woman. "Fine," I whispered, my voice breaking. I opened the door and stepped out onto the shoulder under the cold light of the Boston evening. He sped off, leaving me alone, trembling with the echo of Sharon's request and David's coldness ringing in my ears. That day, when my Aunt Diane's advice ceased to be a mere inconvenient formality. It transformed into a lifesaver that, without knowing it, I had just grabbed with all my might as the first waves of a family storm began to crash over me violently. I took out my phone and, with trembling fingers, dialed the number of the only person who at that moment could understand the scale of the disaster. It rang twice before a serene voice answered on the other end. "Aunt Diane," I said, and my voice broke. "I need to see you. Now." Aunt Diane asked no questions when she opened the door to her apartment in the Argüelles neighborhood. She saw me with my swollen eyes and the tremor that still hadn't subsided, and with a silent gesture led me to the living room, an orderly and serious space like herself. She offered me a whiskey. "Drink this and tell me everything," she ordered, sitting across from me in her leather armchair. The words came out in spurts between sips of the burning liquor Sharon's request. The $6,000 David's reaction being abandoned on the highway. As I spoke, Diane's face darkened not with surprise but with a cold, familiar anger. "I knew it," she murmured when I finished. "Or at least I feared it. Does that woman have a history?" "A history?" I asked, drying my cheeks. "Not officially, not in a way that's clearly on record in a courthouse, but yes, in the hallways. Sharon Martinez de la Fuente." She added the de la Fuente after her first divorce. "Sounds more distinguished, doesn't it?" she said with sarcasm. "Arthur David's father is her second husband. A good man, but weak. An empty shell." "And what is this history?" "Financial shenanigans, real estate deals on the edge of legality, private loans with exorbitant interest rates that ended in veiled threats. She had several lawsuits, but she always wriggled out of them or found someone else to take the fall. She's a social climber, Penelope. A social climber with a nose for other people's money and social appearances. That Back Bay life is pure theatre. They live on the edge, but the facade must shine." A wave of nausea washed over me. David had always spoken of his mother's sacrifices, of how hard life had been after her first husband, about whom he never gave details, had abandoned them. The story of the struggling single mum and the brother Kevin. Diane continued getting up to go to her desk. She opened a drawer and took out an old-fashioned paper address book. I have a contact at the South End precinct. A couple of years ago, your fiancé, perhaps in a moment of confidence, mentioned that Kevin had had some trouble. Do you remember? I vaguely recalled it. David had mentioned it in passing, downplaying it. Youthful indiscretion, it's all sorted out now. Well, those troubles have a name: gambling addiction. He was betting online at betting parlors downtown, racked up debts. Debts that, according to my contact, Sharon paid off abruptly. Where did she get the money? A mystery. But since then, Kevin has been tied to his mother's apron strings. He's her boy, her eternally weak child, and now he needs a new car. Of course. To get to that job in Lowell, which if we dig a little probably doesn't exist or is temporary. The room was spinning around me. The pattern was clear, obscene. I was the next link, the source of funding. Does David know all this? I asked, though I feared the answer. Diane sighed, sitting back down. That's the big question, niece. David was raised in the cult of family of unwavering loyalty. Sharon has manipulated him since he was a child, always presenting herself as the martyr, the one who pulled him through. Seeing the truth would require demolishing the altar he carries inside him. It's easier to blame the outsider. You. I have to talk to him, I said with a flicker of desperate hope. If I explain it to him, if I show him it's not normal. And what if he already knows, Penelope? Diane's interruption was gentle but devastating. What if on some level he prefers not to look? Cognitive dissonance is a powerful thing. He'd rather get angry at you, label you as selfish, than face the fact that his mother is an emotional con artist and his brother is a parasite. I decided to investigate on my own. I couldn't rely solely on insinuations. The next day, I called a lawyer friend, Lucy, who specialized in corporate law. I vaguely told her I had an interest in a Sharon Martinez de la Fuente. Let me look into the property registry and civil lawsuits, she said, intrigued. If she's had trouble, something will be there. Meanwhile, the pressure at home was suffocating. David had returned that night, taciturn, pretending nothing had happened, but the atmosphere was frigid. We slept back to back. The next morning, as we ate breakfast in silence, his phone buzzed. It was Sharon. He answered, standing up. Yeah, Mum. No, she hasn't said anything. I told you it's complicated. She doesn't see it like we do. Yeah, a shame. He hung up and stared at me, his arms crossed. My mother is very disappointed, he declared as if reading a press release. So am I replied, holding his gaze. Don't start, Penelope. You're destroying our family harmony over a whim, over a handful of dollars. It's not about the money, David, I said, controlling my voice. It's about the principle. It's because your mother demanded it like it was a tax. It's about the emotional blackmail of, if you don't give, you're not family. It's not blackmail, it's reality, he shouted, losing his temper. In real families, you give things without so much calculation. You with your aunt and her legal machinations, you've corrupted everything. You used to be sweet, understanding. Now you're someone else. Cold. Calculating. Each word was a whip. Calculating, the same epithet Sharon had insinuated. And Kevin, I asked, changing the subject abruptly. How's the job search going? What exactly is this job in Lowell? A shadow of discomfort, quick as lightning, crossed David's face. What does that have to do with anything? It's something in logistics. I don't know the details. He's managing. He's managing. With his history, he's managing. The question came out on its own, fueled by anger and the information Diane had given me. David turned pale. Then his expression became dangerous. What do you mean with his history? What have you been doing, Penelope? investigating my family. He took a step toward me. He's my brother. Who do you think you are, digging up his past? That's our business. It becomes my business if I'm being asked for $6,000 for him, I shouted back, standing up. I have a right to know what or who I'm investing in. It's not an investment, it's help, he roared. But I see that concept doesn't fit in your accountant's brain. My mother was right. You're more worried about protecting your little nest egg than about building something with me. Maybe this is all a mistake. The phrase, maybe this is all a mistake, fell between us like shattered glass. He looked at me defiantly, perhaps expecting me to burst into tears to give in to beg. But something had broken inside me. The fear was being replaced by a cold, clear determination. Maybe it is, David, I said with a calmness that surprised even me. Maybe it is. Because I'm not getting married to become the official sponsor of your brother's problems, or the dowry your mother thinks she's found. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He turned around and stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard it made the picture frames rattle. Hours later, Lucy called. Penelope, I found things, shady things. Sharon has 2 civil lawsuits for non-payment of gambling debts in Kevin's name, but she's listed as the guarantor. She paid them off in a lump sum 3 years ago. It coincides with the below-market value sale of a property she owned in Dorchester. There's also a fraud complaint filed by an Elena Rivers. It was dismissed for lack of evidence, but Ms. Rivers's statement is revealing. She says Sharon, her supposed friend, convinced her to invest in a business that never existed, that she used her son David to win her trust, that when she asked for her money back, Sharon threatened to ruin her life. The world stopped. Used her son David. Lucy's words rang like a funeral bell. Do you have a copy of that statement? I asked, my voice hoarse. Yes, and there's more. Sharon's first husband, David's biological father, didn't abandon them. He fled to Argentina, hounded by debts she had incurred in his name. He has a restraining order against her. Send it all to me, Lucy. Please. Penelope, this is serious. Are you sure you want to see this? More than sure, I replied, looking at the door through which David had just stormed, filled with a righteous anger and an infinite pain. Now I had the pieces of the puzzle, and the picture they formed was monstrous. The next step was to confront the truth, even if it meant losing everything I thought I had. Or perhaps precisely because it meant losing it. Lucy's folder arrived by email mid-afternoon. I opened it with fingers numb with tension. Inside, scanned documents, cold and impersonal, painted a devastating portrait. Elena Rivers's complaint, filled with sordid details of how Sharon had won her trust, talking about her future daughter-in-law, mentioning David constantly to give an appearance of a serious, united family. The sale of the Dorchester property, for less than its value, registered in a hurry. The civil suits against Kevin, with Sharon's name as guarantor, scribbled in a nervous hand. It was worse than I had imagined. She wasn't just an opportunistic social climber. She was a systematic predator. And my fiancé, the man I was going to share my life with, was at best a blind instrument, and at worst a conscious accomplice. David didn't come back that night, nor did he answer my messages. The silence was his weapon, a form of slow torture designed to break me, to make me, scared by the prospect of losing him, run back to apologize and hand over the $6,000. But the Penelope who would have done that, Seta, was buried under the weight of Aunt Diane's blue folder and Lucy's PDF files. The next morning I went to his architecture firm. I had a key he had given me, in case you ever want to surprise me, he had said, with a smile that now seemed obscenely naive. The office in the South End was quiet. It was early. His partner hadn't arrived yet. I found him in his office in front of the blueprints for a project, but he wasn't working. He had a lost look, his features gaunt. He looked up as I entered, and his expression immediately hardened. "What are you doing here?" he asked without greeting me. "We need to talk. For real. No shouting," I said, closing the door behind me and sitting across from him without waiting for an invitation. I put my purse on the floor, but kept the plastic folder with the documents on my lap. "We've talked enough. You said horrible things about my family," he replied, crossing his arms, a childishly defensive posture. "I didn't say anything that wasn't the truth, David. And now I have the proof," I said, dropping the folder onto the blueprints, onto the clean, orderly drawing of the life he projected symbolically, staining it with the chaotic, dirty reality of his own. He looked at the folder with contempt. "More papers from your aunt. More poison. No. Public documents, lawsuits, complaints, property records," I explained, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. I opened the folder and took out the first sheet, Elena Rivers's statement. I slid it across the table to him. "Read. Read what your mother did to this woman, how she used your name, your reputation to gain her trust and then rob her." David didn't touch it. He stared at the paper as if it were a snake. "I'm not going to read garbage you got through trickery." "It's not trickery," I burst out, losing my composure for a second. "They're facts. David, your mother, Sharon Martinez de la Fuente, was sued for fraud. Your brother Kevin has a gambling problem and debts that your mother has been covering with whatever she can. Where do you think the money to pay those debts came from? Where does the money for the Back Bay apartment come from? For the appearances." "Shut up!" he roared, jumping to his feet. His chair fell backward with a crash. "You have no right to judge my family, you with your perfect life and your judge aunt. You don't know what it's like to struggle to do whatever it takes to get by." "Get by? By scamming people," I yelled back, also standing up. The desk separated us, a chasm of papers and betrayals. "Is that the lesson your mother taught you, that the end justifies the means? And what about me, David? Am I the next means? Is the $6,000 for Kevin's car just the down payment to scam the next person?" His face contorted into a mask of hatred I didn't recognize. "You don't get to talk about my brother," he spat. "He's had problems, yes, but he's clean now. My mother has done what she could. Always for her family. Always for us. You would never understand. Your family is all full refrigerators and carefree summers at the beach." "My family taught me to be honest," I retorted, trembling, "and not to let myself be used. Your mother didn't ask me for help, David. She demanded a ransom. The ransom for your hand. Give me money or you don't marry my son. And you're on her side. Because she's my mother," he shouted, pounding the desk with his fist. The papers jumped. "Blood is thicker than water, Penelope. Thicker than any prenuptial agreement or declaration of assets. She will always be there. You, I can see at the first sign of trouble, you investigate and judge and accuse." There it was, the core of it all. His immovable, pathological loyalty was with them, with the dysfunction that had raised him. I was the outsider, the intruder threatening the system. "Then there's nothing left to talk about," I said. And I felt a strange coldness wash over me, extinguishing the pain, leaving only an enormous exhaustion. "If your loyalty lies with those who deceive and manipulate, and not with the person who wants to build something clean with you, then this is over." The word "over" seemed to echo in the room. David paled. He hadn't expected it. He thought his silence, his anger would break me. What are you saying?" he asked, his voice losing some of its bravado. "That I'm not going to marry you, David? That this is finished? You can keep your family loyalty and the $6,000 your mother isn't going to get from me. I picked up the folder. My movements were slow, deliberate. Inside me, something was breaking with each gesture, but the anger and certainty kept it together. You can't, he stammered, shifting from rage to disbelief. The wedding, the guests, the deposit on the venue. Cancel them, or have the party with your mother and Kevin, I said, walking towards the door. I wasn't going to cry, not in front of him. Penelope! His voice was a desperate cry. Wait, don't do this. We can talk about it. I stopped at the door without turning around. We've already talked, David. And you've chosen. Goodbye. I stepped out onto the street. The morning air, fresh and filled with the hum of the city, hit my face. I didn't cry. I walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench, and only then did I let the tremors rack my body. It wasn't just grief for the dead relationship. It was fear. Fear of what would come next. It didn't take long. Barely an hour later, my phone started ringing. First, it was my mother, her voice distraught. Penelope, honey, what happened? Sharon called me. She says you broke up with David in the cruelest way, that you accused her of terrible things. Then messages from mutual friends asking cautiously, a distant uncle asking if it was true, I had made a scene over a money issue. Sharon's machine had kicked into gear. The smear campaign, the version that would circulate, would be simple and devastating. The rich girl from the South End. The judge's niece broke up with poor David because his humble mother asked for a small favor for her brother. She didn't want to get her hands dirty with a working-class family. She thought she was too good for them. That afternoon, when I finally mustered the courage to return to my apartment, I found David waiting for me at the door. He wasn't alone. Beside him, in an expensive coat and with an expression of outraged dignity, was Sharon. Penelope. Sharon said, her voice a chill that cut the air of the landing. I think we need to clear up this misunderstanding woman to woman. There is no misunderstanding, Sharon, I replied, fumbling for my keys with hands that barely responded. Of course there is, David intervened, a false plea in his eyes. You've misinterpreted everything. Mom just wanted to help Kevin, and you started investigating us like we're criminals. Please, child, Sharon insisted, taking a step closer. Her expensive perfume enveloped me suffocatingly. Let us in. Let's talk. David loves you. This is all just nonsense. We're not going to let something like this break up such a beautiful wedding over some old papers and gossip. Her gaze fell on the folder I was still clutching tightly. Families forgive, they overcome. Let me in and we'll fix it. It was a trap. I knew it. Inside her smooth talk, her manipulation, the fake tears, the pressure from David, it could make me give in, or at least get me to lower my guard. There's nothing to fix, I said with a firmness that surprised me. The relationship with David is over, and I'm not giving you a single dollar. You can leave. Sharon's mask cracked. Her eyes, those jet-black eyes, shone with a genuine venomous fury. Very well, she said, her voice losing all sweetness, becoming metallic and sharp. If that's how you want it, little girl, I'll give you some advice. You're going to retract all these slanderous things you've been spouting. You're going to tell everyone it was a mistake, a nervous breakdown, and you're going to go through with the wedding behaving like the decent wife my son deserves. She paused dramatically. Because if you don't, if you insist on this selfish tantrum, I promise you, you will regret it. Your name and the name of your precious judge aunt are going to be dragged through the mud. I'll say you insulted me, that you despise our family, that you only wanted the name and the status. And believe me, I know how to make people believe me. There it was, the direct threat, unadorned. David looked at her, and on his face there was no surprise, only a sort of complicit resignation. He said nothing to stop her. The worst part was that he believed in her game. He believed his mother was just defending her family. Defending him. I looked at David, searching for one last vestige of the man I had fallen in love with. I didn't find him. I only saw Sharon's son. Threatening a judge even indirectly is a crime, Sharon, I said, vaguely remembering something Diane had mentioned. And recording a conversation without consent is too, but since I see this is getting worse, I'm going to allow myself to protect my integrity. I pulled my phone from my pocket where I had indeed activated the voice recorder before getting off the elevator. The screen showed it was recording. Sharon's face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. David turned pale. "You're a snake," she screeched. "I'm not the person you wanted to swindle," I corrected, finally opening the door. "Now get out of my building and do not contact me again. If you do have no doubt that this recording and these documents," I tapped the folder with my knuckles, "will go where they need to go." I slammed the door behind me, leaning my back against the wood. From the other side, I heard Sharon's shrill voice cursing and the muffled sound of David trying to calm her down. Then footsteps, fading away. I slid to the floor. The artificial courage that had sustained me evaporated in a rush. I was trembling from head to toe. I had burned all my bridges. There was no going back. War had been declared. And I, alone in my apartment with a folder full of papers and a recording on my phone, was the only army I had. The fear was atrocious, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel a shred of doubt. The recording was a double-edged sword. I had it, yes, but using it meant escalating the conflict to a level from which I might not be able to return. The days following the expulsion of David and Sharon from my building were a whirlwind of anxiety and rumors. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some calls were of genuine support from friends who, after hearing my version, were indignant. Others, the most frequent, had that doubtful, condescending tone. "Penelope, honey, are you sure you're not exaggerating? These are just family matters. Sharon is devastated. She says she only wanted what was best for poor Kevin. David is such a good guy. A misunderstanding like this will ruin everything." The social pressure was an invisible wall crushing me. In America, family can be a sacred cow, and I was being painted as the witch who wanted to kick it down. Even my parents, initially understanding, began to waver. "Daughter, what if you try mediation? A wedding is a very serious thing to cancel just like that." It was then that my Aunt Diane decided it was time to go on the offensive, not with shouts, but with the devastating coldness of someone who knows the law and the human heart. She summoned me to her chambers at the courthouse on a Saturday morning when the hallways were deserted and silent. Seeing me with dark circles under my eyes and pale skin, she made no comment. She indicated for me to sit and placed a manila folder in front of me. Different from mine. Thicker, with the seal of a judicial archive. "I've done some digging," she said without preamble. "Deeper digging. And I've located someone who has already been through what you're going through." "Who?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Elena Rivers, the woman who sued Sharon for fraud. The complaint was dismissed for lack of conclusive evidence, but the statement you have is just the tip of the iceberg. I found her. She lives in Miami. I've spoken with her and she's willing to talk to you." To me, why? Because I explained your situation, and because even though she couldn't win in court, she knows the truth and needs someone to listen. Most of all, she needs someone to believe her. And Diane passed me a phone number written on a post-it note. "Call her. Listen. And then, if you have the courage, make David listen." I trembled. Speaking with a previous victim of Sharon's gave the whole thing a terrifying and real dimension. It was no longer suspicion. It was a pattern, A modus operandi. I grabbed the paper as if it were a high-voltage wire. The call to Elena Rivers was one of the hardest conversations of my life. Her voice on the other end sounded tired, but it became firm and clear as I told her my story. "Yes," she said with a soft southern lilt. "That's her. The same tactic. First, the intense friendship. She makes you feel like family. She tells you about her wonderful son, the architect. So proper, such a good catch. In my case, David wasn't even my boyfriend. He was just the son of a friend. But she used him as bait, as proof of her respectability. Then comes the sob story, a sad tale, an urgent need. For me, it was a surefire investment in some land on the Florida coast. I lost $15,000. When I asked for explanations, when I demanded my money back, the kind Sharon disappeared. The other one appeared, the one who threatened to say the money was a gift, that I was crazy, that she would ruin my reputation. I backed down. I filed the complaint more out of desperation than anything else, but without evidence, without a clear contract, it was dismissed. She paused, and her voice broke slightly. The worst part wasn't the money, Penelope. It was the humiliation. The feeling of having been so stupid, of having trusted someone who only sees you as a wallet with legs. And the son, did he know? I don't know. I confessed, a lump in my throat. Well, you'd better find out for your own good. If he knew and hid it from you, then he's as guilty as she is. Run, honey. Run from that family like the plague. I hung up and stared at the phone, feeling the weight of her pain. A pain that was now also mine. I had to confront David with this. I couldn't let the lie continue to grow. I arranged to meet him in a neutral public place, the cafeteria at the Museum of Fine Arts. I arrived half an hour early with my headphones on, replaying the recording of my conversation with Elena. When I saw him walk in looking for me with a nervous glance, I felt a pang of pity. He looked like he had aged 10 years. He was wearing the same wrinkled shirt from the day of the argument at his firm. He sat down without saying hello. We ordered 2 coffees. The silence was thick, heavy. "What is this for, Penelope?" "To humiliate me again?" he finally asked, not looking me in the eye. "No, it's for you to listen," I said, placing my phone on the table. I took out a pair of earbuds and slid them toward him. "Listen to this. Then we'll talk." He looked at the earbuds as if they were a weapon. Reluctantly, he put them in. I pressed play on the recording of my conversation with Elena Rivers. I watched his face as the voice of a tired, hurt stranger narrated the story of how his mother had deceived her using his name. His profession, his image as an exemplary son, as bait. I saw the color drain from his face, his lips tighten into a white line, his hands on the table begin to tremble slightly. When the recording ended, he sat motionless with the earbuds in, staring into space. Who is that?" he managed to say, his voice hoarse. "Elena Rivers, the woman who sued your mother for fraud 4 years ago. The same one whose statement I have. The one who lost $15,000, David. Not 6. 15. He took off the earbuds as if they were burning him. It's her word against my mother's. That woman must be resentful. She must be making up all the details, David." I cut in, implacable. "The land on the Florida coast that never existed. The calls where your mother used your name to add credibility. My son, David, the architect, has seen it. It's a fantastic opportunity. Does that sound familiar?" He shook his head, but it was a mechanical, unconvincing movement. His defenses were crumbling. "No, it can't be. My mother, she's tough. She's demanding. But she's not a con artist." "That's probably what your mother's first husband thought. I said, delivering my final, cruelest blow, the one Diane had given me that same morning. Do you know where your biological father is, David? The one who, according to her, abandoned you. He looked up, confused. It was an old wound, a shadow zone he never dared to touch. In Argentina. He fled. He wanted nothing to do with us. He fled from debts. I corrected softly, watching as each word stabbed him like a dagger. Debts your mother incurred in his name. Credit cards, loans. He found out when the foreclosure notices started arriving. He left so he wouldn't end up in jail or completely broke. He has a restraining order against Sharon. Did your mother ever tell you about that order? David's expression was that of a man watching his universe collapse. All the pillars of his family history, the struggling mother, the deadbeat father, the unbreakable bond against adversity, were cracking under the weight of the facts. No, those are lies. Things your aunt must have made up too. My aunt is a judge, David. She doesn't make things up, she investigates. And the papers, the records, they're there. I said, opening my folder and pulling out copies of the documents Diane had obtained. The restraining order, old bank statements with debts in his father's name. I put them in front of him. He didn't touch them. He just stared at them as if the words were dancing and he couldn't focus. Why? He murmured, more to himself than to me. Why would she do that? Because for her the end justifies the means, and the end is to maintain appearances, to control everything around her, and to get money to plug the holes that she or Kevin create. I was the next means, David. My money, my stability, my assets. Kevin's car was just the first step. After that would come other family needs, until I was bled dry, or until I rebelled. And if I rebelled, she would destroy me socially, just like she's trying to do now, just like she did with Eleanor Rivers. He buried his face in his hands, rubbing his eyes hard. For a moment I thought he was going to cry, but when he lowered his hands, his expression was one of deep rage, directed not at me, but at some indeterminate point at the terrible truth being forced upon him. You knew, didn't you? I asked, asking the question I feared most. Not all the details, but you suspected something. You knew Kevin's youthful indiscretions were more than that. You knew your mother had ways of getting money that weren't entirely clean, and you looked the other way. His silence was the most painful confirmation. Not a resounding yes, but not an indignant denial either. It was a guilty, ashamed silence. She's my mother, he whispered at last. His voice broken, no longer containing reproach towards me, but an infinite despair. After my father, after what I thought happened. She gave everything for me. She raised me. I wouldn't be an architect without her. She taught me that family comes first, that you have to protect each other at any cost. At any cost. Does that include lying, swindling, and blackmailing? I said, my own voice breaking. And me, David. Was I also supposed to be sacrificed on the altar of your family? He looked at me then, and for the first time in weeks, I saw the man I had fallen in love with. Scared, lost, shattered by the deepest betrayal. No, I just wanted you to be happy. For us to be happy. I thought the car thing was just a loan that Kevin was really going to change. My mother told me. She assured me. She lied to you. I cut in, wiping away an angry tear. Just like she's always lied to you, and you chose to believe her, not me. You chose her version of reality, even though it was rotten. He nodded, slowly, defeated. The certainty, that terrible weight, had fallen upon him. So now what? He asked, empty. Now you decide, I replied, standing up. The untouched coffee was cold. You can keep looking the other way, be the loyal son who helps his mother find the next victim. Or you can face the truth, as horrible as it is. But do it far away from me. Our path, David, diverged the day you asked me to choose between my dignity and your family, and I've already chosen. I left money for the coffee on the table. As I walked out of the cafeteria, the Boston sun hit my face. I didn't feel relief. I felt an immense but clean pain. There were no more doubts. The truth, however cruel, had set me free. Now I had to live with the consequences. And seeing the look of devastation in David's eyes, I knew the storm was far from over. Sharon would not give up so easily. She had lost a battle. But for her, the war had just begun, and I had to be ready. The truth, once unleashed, didn't bring peace. It brought a whirlwind of consequences. After our meeting at the museum, David disappeared from my life for 3 days. No calls, no messages. A dense, eloquent silence that I interpreted with a dull, resigned pain as his final answer. He had chosen the refuge of denial, the comfortable family swamp. I was wrong. On the 4th day, early in the morning, my apartment buzzer rang insistently. It wasn't the brief ring of a delivery person. It was a nervous, prolonged succession. I looked through the peephole and my heart leaped. It was David, but not the arrogant David from the argument at his firm, nor the shattered one from the cafeteria. This one had bloodshot eyes, several days' worth of stubble, and a look of animal desperation. I opened the door with the chain still on. "What do you want, David? You have to let me in. We have to talk. Now." His voice was hoarse, urgent. "We already talked, and I have nothing more to say to you." "Penelope, please," he yelled, slapping the door with the palm of his hand. "It's about my mother, about what she's done." Something in his tone, a genuine panic, made me hesitate. I slid the chain off and opened the door. He burst in like a hurricane, smelling of sweat and stale coffee. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my distance. "I confronted my mother," he said, collapsing onto the sofa and burying his face in his hands. "After what you showed me, I had to know. I showed her the stuff about Elena Rivers. I put it right in front of her. I stood motionless, leaning against the entryway wall. I hadn't expected that. And—" He lifted his head, and I saw tears of rage and humiliation carving tracks through the grime on his cheeks. She didn't deny it. Not really. She got defensive, then hysterical. Said that woman was crazy jealous. But when I asked her about the details about the land, about why she used my name, she just said she did it for the family, that it was in the past, that I didn't understand the pressure of being a single mother, of raising us. "That's not a denial, David. It's a justification," I said coldly, though inside a small, bitter relief stirred. At least now he saw it. "I know," he roared, getting up and starting to pace the room like a caged animal. But then she brought up Kevin, said he was the one in trouble now that the car was a real necessity, that if she didn't get the money, Kevin's friends might hurt him, that she was desperate. And then she dropped the big one. He paused, panting, and looked at me with eyes full of authentic horror. "She told me that you had already agreed, that after thinking about it, you understood it was the right thing to do, that you were going to give the $6,000, that you had only made all that fuss to test my loyalty, that the whole act of investigating, of cancelling the wedding, was a test of love, that I had failed." Gadi. The air was knocked out of my lungs. The audacity of the lie was monstrous, brilliant in its perversity. It turned my resistance into a whim, my dignity into an absurd test, and her into the messenger of my supposed change of heart. "And you believed her?" I asked, holding back nausea. "No," he shouted. but it was a cry of anguish, not conviction. Not completely, but she had proof. She showed me a text on her phone. A text. Yeah, from your number. It said, Sharon, I've reflected. David is right. Family is what's most important. I'll make the transfer this week. Please don't tell him anything. I want it to be a surprise. Something like that. I felt the floor open up beneath me. A chill ran down my spine. I never sent that message, I said with a deadly calm. I know that now. He nodded agitatedly. Because later, when she went to bed crying dramatically the perfect victim, I checked her phone. She'd left it unlocked. Penelope, the message wasn't in her inbox. It was in her drafts. She wrote it herself. She had it ready to show me, to manipulate me. The revelation was like a punch to the gut. The premeditation was terrifying. Sharon didn't just react. She planned her moves with the coldness of a chess player. And is Kevin really in danger? I asked, almost not wanting to know. David let out a bitter, desperate laugh. Yeah, but not from friends. From his gambling debts. My mother has been covering for him with whatever she could. The car. The car was an excuse. The money was for another loan shark. She confessed it through her tears, when she saw her text message lie. Wasn't fully convincing me. She begged me to help her to convince you that between all of us, we could solve it. That once we were married with our salaries. Stop! I interrupted, raising my voice. I couldn't take it anymore. Do you see it, David? Do you see it clearly now? She's not a mother in distress. She's a manipulator who uses you, who would use me, who uses your brother's tragedy to get money. And you knew. Not all the details, but you knew something smelled wrong. And you still came to pressure me. You still called me selfish. He broke down. Literally. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees in the middle of my living room, sobbing with a raw, guttural sound. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Penelope. I didn't know. I didn't want to see. It was easier to be angry at you than to face this. I failed you. I failed you in the most horrible way. Seeing him like that broke something in me, but not the compassion he was perhaps seeking. It broke the last thread of connection. The love I felt for him had been poisoned, transforming into a mixture of pity and disgust. Disgust for his weakness, for his willful blindness. Get up, David, I said in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, flat and cold. There's nothing here anymore, nothing to save. The wedding is cancelled. I don't want to see you again. He looked up, his face soaked with tears and snot. Can't I even try to fix this? I see it now. I know the truth now. It's too late, I whispered. The truth arrived after you betrayed me, after you allowed your mother to blackmail and defame me. Your conversion is very nice, but it doesn't erase what you did. And now please leave. He staggered to his feet. He looked at me for a long moment, as if searching my eyes for a hint of forgiveness, of the sweet understanding Penelope he had known. He didn't find her. He only found the wall of ice that betrayal and the instinct for survival had built. She's not going to give up, he murmured at the door. Now that she knows that I know that I've told you everything, it's going to be worse. She's going to try to destroy you. She's already trying, I replied. And now at least I'll know why. When he left, the weight of the silence was absolute. I didn't cry. I sat on the sofa he had stained with his desperation and made a cold, calculated decision. The kind of decision my former self would never have made. I took out my phone and called all the wedding vendors, the caterer, the church, the dressmaker, the band. One by one, I cancelled everything. The florist started to cry. The restaurant manager threatened me with a lawsuit for breach of contract. I accepted the penalties without a fight. Each cancellation was a nail in the coffin, but it was also an act of liberation. Then I wrote a short, clear message in a group chat with our closest friends and family. For non-negotiable personal reasons, David and I have decided to cancel our wedding. I appreciate your understanding during this difficult time. I will not be making any further comments. I sent it and turned off my phone. The storm didn't take long to break, but it didn't come from where I expected. First, my mother was at my door 2 hours later, hysterical. "Penelope, my God, what have you done?" Sharon called me. She says you've broken her son's heart, that you've accused him of terrible things, that you're unbalanced, that you're jealous of her relationship with David. People are talking. I tried to explain, to show her the recording, the documents, but she didn't want to see, didn't want to hear. "I don't care about papers," she yelled. "What matters is family, what people say. Now everyone thinks we're snobs, that we look down on humble people. You've stained our name." It was my father, calmer but equally affected, who quieted her. But in his eyes, I also saw disappointment, incomprehension. What people would say was a wall too thick to breach. Then came the anonymous messages on my Instagram. "Are you so snobby you can't help your fiancé's family? You have money but no heart. The judge aunt has filled your head with nonsense." Sharon was using her networks, her friendships, the old and effective method of poisonous rumor. The final straw was when I arrived at my office the next day and my boss called me into a meeting. With a concerned look, she told me she had received an anonymous call questioning my emotional stability and professional judgment, suggesting my personal problems might affect my work. She didn't have to say a name. It was Sharon's hand reaching into my professional life. Sitting in the office bathroom, trembling with rage and helplessness, I took out my phone. I didn't call David. I didn't call my parents. I dialed the number of the only person whose loyalty was not in question, whose strength was my lighthouse in that sea of mud. "Aunt Diane," I said when she answered, "I need a lawyer, not to defend myself from rumors, to attack." Aunt Diane didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't have to. In her eyes after the phone call, I saw the cold anger of someone whose worst predictions have been confirmed, and the iron determination of someone who has no intention of allowing it. 48 hours later, I was sitting in a sober office on Newbury Street, across from the lawyer she had chosen, Damien Pierce. He was a middle-aged man with a serious expression and an analytical gaze, specializing in civil law, and according to Diane, in dealing with family vermin disguised as respectable people. "You have a case, Ms. Cruz," he said, after reviewing the folder with the documents and listening to the recording of Sharon's threat. "It's not easy because emotional blackmail and defamation are difficult to prove conclusively, but the combination of elements is powerful. The demand for money under pressure, the explicit threat in this recording, the prior history of Mrs. Martinez." He pointed to the papers from Elena Rivers, "and now the smear campaign that is affecting your professional life. We can act on several fronts." "Which are?" I asked, my hands clasped in my lap. The business suit I wore felt like borrowed armor. "First, a civil lawsuit for moral damages and defamation against Sharon Martinez. With this, we seek financial compensation and, above all, a judgment that publicly declares her conduct unlawful. It's slow, but it's a blow to her reputation," Pierce explained in a calm voice. "Second, and more forcefully, we file a criminal complaint for the crime of coercion. The recording is key. She demands money from you under the threat of ruining your reputation and your aunt's. That's coercion. If the judge admits it, it could end in a criminal trial." "And Eleanor Rivers's fraud complaint. Can't that be reopened?" Diane asked, sitting beside me with her most inscrutable judicial expression. "Difficult. It was dismissed." but we can use it as a precedent, as a pattern of behavior to lend credibility to our version. What we can do is present all this documentation in an orderly and public manner. Pierce paused meaningfully. Sometimes the best justice isn't found only in a courtroom. I understood. This wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. It was about winning the public opinion war that Sharon had unleashed. What do I need to do? I asked. Leave it to me, Pierce said. I'll handle drafting the lawsuit and the complaint. And in parallel with your aunt's help, we can ensure certain information reaches strategic ears. Court reporters, social columnists. It's not an illegal leak. It's a legitimate defense. If she plays dirty with rumors, we respond with documented facts. I signed the necessary power of attorney papers with a steady hand. There was no turning back. As we left the office, Diane put a hand on my shoulder. You're going to be the bad guy for a while, Penelope. The one who sues her future mother-in-law, the one who airs dirty laundry. Be ready. But remember, you didn't start this. You're just defending yourself. The legal storm broke with surprising speed. Pierce was efficient. Within days, Sharon received a certified letter at her Back Bay address with the notification of the civil lawsuit for moral damages and the intent to file a criminal complaint. The reaction, as I later learned from a source, the troubled Arthur David's father, who called my father half ashamed and half scared, was apocalyptic. Shouting, crying accusations of conspiracy, threats of suicide. Sharon Cornered doubled down on the social front. Her version became even more tearful and victimized. Wealthy Penelope, with her judge aunt, wants to imprison a poor mother for asking for help for her son. She's destroying us for not bowing to her whim. But now we had ammunition. Diane called a contact, a well-known judicial reporter for the Boston Globe. She didn't give him the story. She gave him the context, casually mentioning that in certain Boston circles, a woman with a history of fraud complaints was now harassing and defaming a young woman to extort money from her. The reporter, a sharp guy, smelled blood. He investigated on his own. Lawsuit records are public. He found Eleanor Rivers' dismissed complaint and Sharon's history. One Sunday morning in the society section, a short but devastatingly precise article appeared. It didn't name anyone with full last names, but the initials SMPCDM. And the descriptions: residence in the Back Bay, architect son, alleged scam of a friend years ago, left little doubt in the social circle we shared. It spoke of emotional blackmail, a pattern of behavior, and using family as an alibi. The article was a torpedo to the waterline of the appearances Sharon so carefully maintained. The effect was immediate and cathartic. My phone, which had been receiving messages of reproach, filled up with notifications again. Now they were of support, of apologies. Penelope, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. How awful. What a terrible woman. David should put a stop to her. Public sympathy, so fickle, swung sharply in my favor. Sharon had underestimated the power of an official document and a serious newspaper article against her coffee shop whispers. But the hardest blow came from within. 2 days after the article, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Arthur David's father. His voice sounded like ashes. Penelope, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know half of it. Sharon had me fooled too. I've seen the papers, the ones your lawyer showed ours. It's unbearable. Where's David? I asked, unable to avoid a certain morbid curiosity. He left home. After the argument with Sharon about the article, he said he couldn't take it anymore, that he was up to his neck in lies. I don't know where he is. Probably at a friend's house. Kevin has disappeared. The loan sharks have been calling the house. Sharon is. She's not well. She says it's all your fault that you've destroyed her. I felt no satisfaction. I felt a huge emptiness and a pang of pity for Arthur, a weak man caught in the storm he had helped create with his passivity. "I'm sorry for you, Arthur," I said sincerely, "but I was only defending myself. I know. And I'm not asking you to withdraw anything, just that you know I'm sorry." The social battle was won, but the legal one continued. The preliminary hearing for the admission of the criminal complaint was set for a month later. Sharon, likely advised by a public defender or some acquaintance, tried one last move, a settlement offer. Through her new lawyer, she proposed to retract all her comments and sign a letter of apology in exchange for me dropping both the civil suit and the criminal complaint. Pierce communicated this to me in his office. "It's a sign of weakness. She knows she could lose, and a criminal conviction, however minor, would be the total ruin of her social facade," he analysed. "What do you advise?" "That you reject it, unless the letter of apology is public notarized, admits the specific facts, and includes compensation for moral damages and the wedding cancellation costs. A symbolic but significant sum." I agreed. I didn't want her money. I wanted her admission of guilt, her legal humiliation. It was a dark desire, but after everything I had suffered, I owed it to myself. The counter-proposal infuriated Sharon. She refused flatly. Her pride or her psychopathy wouldn't let her bow down in writing. She preferred the risk of a trial. On the day of the preliminary hearing at the Suffolk County Courthouse, I went accompanied by Diane and Pierce. I didn't see David. In the courtroom on the other side was Sharon, flanked by a young lawyer who looked like he was in the wrong place. She seemed to have aged 10 years. Her elegance had turned to dishevelment. Her jet-black eyes were now dull, lost. When she saw me, her eyes glittered with pure hatred, but she said nothing. There were no shouts, no scenes. The law, with its cold ritual, drowned it all out. The judge, a middle-aged woman with glasses, examined the briefs. She listened briefly to Pierce, who laid out the facts concisely, and to Sharon's lawyer, who stammered something about family misunderstandings and excessive pressure. Then the magistrate made her decision. There are reasonable grounds to believe a crime of coercion was committed, as documented in the provided recording and in the context of the described family pressure, she declared in a neutral voice. Therefore, I admit the criminal complaint against Ms. Sharon Martinez. The investigation phase will now open. It was a dry, judicial victory. There was no applause, no explosive relief, just the sharp crack of the gavel. Sharon turned even paler, if that was possible. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear. She didn't respond. She just shot me one last look before shuffling out of the courtroom. It was the look of a wounded beast, but it no longer scared me. I knew her power. The power of blackmail and rumor had shattered against the wall of law and proven facts. However, as I stepped out of the courthouse into the square, bathed in a cold winter sun, the feeling of triumph was mixed with a bitter loneliness. I had won. I had defended my name, my integrity, my assets. I had exposed the monsters. But all around me were just ruins, a destroyed relationship. My parents' trust damaged, my social life shattered and rebuilt under the sign of scandal. I wasn't the hero of a story. I was simply a survivor, covered in the mud of the battle that my aunt, with her prescient advice, had given me the tools to fight. Diane put an arm around my shoulders. "This is a new beginning, Penelope. A hard one, but a clean one." I nodded, looking towards the horizon of grey buildings. It was a beginning, yes, but the cost had been so high that I couldn't yet imagine what kind of life could be built on such smouldering ruins. The victory in court was just the end of the chapter. The epilogue of my life as Penelope David's fiancée was written. Now it was time to invent who Penelope period was. And for the first time in a long time, the future wasn't a promise, but a blank page, vast and terrifying. 2 years don't erase the pain, but they shape it, transform it into something solid, a material with which to build. The South End apartment, a witness to so many sweet moments, and the final collapse I sold not for money, but for exorcism. I moved to a bright penthouse in the Beacon Hill neighbourhood, with terraces full of potted plants and an open view of the sky, a space that was mine alone that didn't smell of broken promises. The sentence against Sharon was firm guilty of a misdemeanor charge of coercion, a fine and, most importantly, a 5-year restraining order against me. She didn't go to jail, but the stain on her reputation was lethal. In her Back Bay circle, where appearances were everything, she became a pariah. Doors closed. The newspaper article had done the rest. Arthur, I learned through third parties, finally filed for divorce. A late act of courage, but courage nonetheless. Kevin, the brother, disappeared from the map, sunk in his debts and his demons. And David left Boston. He quit his job at the architecture firm. The rumors had reached there too, tarnishing his professionalism, and he moved to Chicago. I learned through a mutual friend who kept in touch that he was working in a small firm on anonymous projects, that he had cut off all contact with his mother, that he was in therapy. I felt no joy in his ruin nor any compassion. It was like reading a news story about someone I had known a long time ago, in another life. The anger had dissolved, leaving a well of resigned sadness, like the cold ash of a fire. What didn't dissolve was the dull rage at the injustice, at the vulnerability in which I had found myself, and in which I knew thousands of women were. The idea emerged in one of the long conversations with my Aunt Diane, no longer in her office, but sipping vermouth on the terrace of my new penthouse. "The system works, Penelope, but it often arrives too late," she would say, contemplating the orange sunset. "And it requires resources, knowledge, endurance. Many women have none of those things." "I had them," I replied. "I had you. I had my savings to pay Pierce. What about the woman who doesn't have a judge for an aunt, or saving, or the strength to face all that?" Diane looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the same pride as the day I graduated. Well, she should have a place to go. That place was named the Dawn Center, a center for legal advice and psychological support for women in situations of economic or emotional vulnerability within their relationships or families. It wasn't a large building, but a cozy storefront in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood, with a small waiting room, 2 offices, and a room for support groups. I funded it with part of the compensation Sharon eventually had to pay me for moral damages. An irony Diane called poetic, and with donations I secured from feminist lawyers and a few sensitized companies. I wasn't the lawyer. I was the manager, the coordinator, the face who greeted women at the door with a cup of tea and a smile that knew fear and shame. I hired a brilliant young attorney, Sophia, who specialized in economic abuse and family law, and a psychologist, Mara, with infinite patience. Our motto, painted on the entryway wall, was simple: "Your physical and emotional assets belong to you." One autumn afternoon, 2.5 years after the verdict, I was in the office reviewing invoices when Sophia poked her head in. "Penelope, there's a woman at reception asking for you. Says her name is Elena Rivers." I froze. The woman from the recording, the voice on the other end of the phone that had confirmed my nightmare. I had her come in. She was older than I had imagined, petite, with hair dyed a blonde that didn't quite hide the grey and intelligent, tired eyes. She shook my hand firmly. "I know who you are from the press back then," she said without preamble. "And I've been following your center. I came all the way from Miami to thank you. Me? I asked, surprised. For not giving in, for standing up to her, for winning. Her eyes welled up. I couldn't. I let fear and shame beat me. Seeing what you did gave me something I thought I'd lost. Anger. Healthy anger. And with that anger, I sued my ex-husband for unpaid child support, and I won. She smiled a fragile but victorious smile. So in a way, this is yours too. We hugged. We weren't friends. We were trenchmates, survivors of the same dirty war. Elena offered to volunteer for the support group to share her experience. Her story became a beacon for others. The work at the Dawn Center was hard, often heartbreaking. I listened to stories of financial control, emotional blackmail, of women stripped of everything, including their self-esteem. But it was also profoundly healing. Every small victory, a restraining order granted a separate bank account, opened a smile of relief, was a brick with which I rebuilt my own faith in the world. It was in this context that I met Lucas. He was a journalist, specializing in social issues. He came to do a story on the Dawn Center for a digital newspaper. He was tall, with an easy smile, and eyes that truly listened, not to respond, but to understand. He spent a week with us, interviewing the users with their permission and complete discretion, Sophia, Mara, and me. On the last afternoon, after finishing his interview with me, he didn't leave. He stayed to help put away chairs after a support group meeting. "This is incredible work," he said, without looking at me folding a chair. "But it must be so emotionally draining." "Sometimes," I admitted. "But it's a better kind of tired than empty." And he nodded. Then he fixed his green eyes on me. "The story is going to turn out well, but there's one thing I'm not going to include." "Oh, yeah." "Yeah. That the founder of this place is the bravest person I've met in a long time. And that I'd like, if she's not opposed, to invite her for a coffee. Just coffee. To talk about things that have nothing to do with lawsuits or psychologists." I smiled. It was the first time in years that such a proposition didn't set off. All my alarms didn't make me scrutinize for hidden motives. "I accept the coffee," I said. "We can debate the brave part." With Lucas, there was no rush, no grand declarations, no family pressure, no drama. He had his life, his passionate job, a young daughter from a previous relationship with whom he shared custody. I had my center, my scars, my fiercely won independence. We started seeing each other slowly, quiet dinners, walks through the Boston Common, endless talks. He admired my work, but didn't put me on a pedestal. I enjoyed his company without needing him to be my savior. He was a partner, an equal. One afternoon, while reviewing the center's accounts with Diane, she had become our unofficial mentor. She asked me about him. "He's calm," I said, searching for the right word. "And is that good?" she asked, one eyebrow arched. "After the hurricane, calm is a luxury," I replied, and smiled. Diane nodded, satisfied. Then her expression turned more serious. "I heard something through a colleague at the commercial court. David's family, well, what's left of it. Sharon has declared bankruptcy. The Back Bay apartment is in foreclosure. She's gone to live in a small town in Vermont with a sister. Says she's sick." The news reached me like a distant echo. There was no gloating, just a fleeting thought the cycle was closing. The marble facade had crumbled, revealing the rotten mud that was always there. "That's sad," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. "It is," Diane agreed, "but her sadness was born of her own greed. Yours, on the other hand, you've transformed into this." She made a broad gesture encompassing the modest but welcoming office of the Dawn Center. Not many people can say that. Months later, at the official opening of the Dawn Center's expansion, we had rented the adjacent storefront. I was surrounded by women we had helped by fellow lawyers. by friends who had stood by me, by Lucas and his daughter getting juice in a corner. I looked around. The pain hadn't disappeared. It was a scar, a knot in the wood that remembered the storm, but it no longer defined me. My Aunt Diane came over and put a glass of champagne in my hand. "To you, niece," she said, a rare emotion in her voice. "To the judge you have inside you, the one who taught me that sometimes the most revolutionary act is to protect what is yours." I toasted gently, clinking her glass. Across the room, Lucas smiled at me. It wasn't a smile of possession or expectation. It was a smile of companionship, of shared celebration. I didn't know what the future held with him, but for the first time, that didn't scare me. Because whatever it was, I would walk it on my own 2 feet on ground that I myself had cleared. The girl who had obediently signed a declaration of assets on her aunt's advice was dead. In her place was a woman who had used that same document as the first shield in a battle she hadn't sought, but had known how to win. And not just for herself. I looked at Eleanor, who was talking animatedly with a young woman who had just arrived at the center, and I knew that the victory, the only one that truly mattered, was that having transformed the mud others throw at you into the foundation of something new, something solid, something of your own. Finn.